further ado. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to the millions of Negro slaves who were seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So, we've gathered here today to dramatize this shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to the nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic were writing the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were writing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. A note that states that all men, yes, both black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro a bad check, a check that has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice has gone bankrupt. We refuse to believe that the great vaults of opportunity of this nation no longer hold prosperity. So, we've come to cash this check. A check that upon demand will give us the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxuries of cooling off or take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of our democracy. It would be fatal for our nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. Now is the time to rise from the dark, desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. And now is the time to rise from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro just needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundation of our nation until the bright days of justice emerge. And that is something I must say to my people who stand on the worn threshold which leads to the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, let us not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not drink from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on a high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not let our creative protests turn into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community had led us to believe that our white brothers were not our friends. We must not distrust our white brothers and sisters, because as their presence is evidenced here today, they have come to realize that their dignity is tied to our dignity. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the promise that we will march ahead. We cannot turn back. Because there are those who ask the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We cannot be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, are unable to gain lodging in the motels of the highways or the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as our children are robbed of their dignity and stripped of their adulthood by signs stating for whites only. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like the waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Now, I am not unmindful that many of you have come here today out of great trials and tribulation. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. So go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to South Carolina, and go back to the slums and the ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that there will be a change. My brothers and sisters, I say to you today, even though we face the difficulties of today and of tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream that is deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream today that one day our nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that one day down in the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of racial justice. I have a dream that one day down in the state of Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, that right down there in Alabama, little black boys and girls will be able to hold hands with little white boys and girls as brothers and sisters. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day the rough hills shall be made plain and the crooked places shall be made straight. I have a dream. I have a dream today. The glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we'll be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we'll be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. I go back, so let us not wallow in the valley of despair. For there will be one day when we will all be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, so let freedom ring. And if America's to become a true nation, then this must become true. So let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California, but not only that, let freedom ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state and every city. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee, and let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. And when we do this, when we let freedom ring, we will be able to join hands, all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, great God.